In a world that feels like one giant, never-ending broadcast, there is a quiet group of people who choose to stay off air. You know who they are. They have accounts, they follow your updates, and they might even send you a reel at 2 a.m. But their own profile is a ghost town. No stories, no life updates, and a profile picture that hasn't changed since 2017. While the rest of the digital world is obsessed with personal branding and the constant curation of their future self-continuity. These individuals exist in a state of digital invisibility. To the average user, this looks like boredom, or perhaps a lack of social life. But in reality, the choice to never post is a deeply complex psychological stance. It's not just about privacy. It's about a fundamental difference in how their brains process social validation and external perception. We are currently living through a period of massive psychological shift. Statistics suggest that while 70% of social media users are active contributors, a significant 30% have moved into a phase of hyper-observational passivity. These are the lurkers, the digital ghosts. But why do they do it? Why do they choose to consume without contributing? While mainstream culture tells us that if you didn't post it, it didn't happen, these individuals operate under a completely different internal logic. They are often highly susceptible to what psychologists call identity foreclosure. In a digital sense, they refuse to commit to a public version of themselves that they might outgrow tomorrow. Let's break down the clinical nomenclature of the non-poster. The first driver is often a high level of impression management anxiety. For most people, posting a photo is a hit of dopamine. But for the non-poster, a post is a liability. They are hyper-aware of temporal discounting, the idea that the social debt of having to maintain an image or respond to comments outweighs the fleeting benefit of a few likes. To them, a social media profile isn't a gallery. It's a digital paper trail that they don't want to be followed. They value identity fluidity over identity fixation. By never posting, they retain the power to change who they are without having to explain it to a digital audience. Then, we have the concept of the illusion of transparency. Many non-posters feel that if they were to share their internal world, it would be misunderstood, or worse, ignored. This leads to a protective mechanism known as selective invisibility. They aren't hiding because they have something to hide. They are hiding because they value the purity of an experience that hasn't been contaminated by the gaze of others. When you post a sunset, you are no longer just looking at a sunset. You are looking at a post about a sunset. You are performing. The non-poster refuses to perform. They want to keep their subjective well-being decoupled from social comparison theory. For many, this behavior traces back to childhood and early attachment styles. If you grew up in an environment where your achievements were overanalyzed or where being seen felt unsafe, you might have developed a dismissive avoidant relationship with digital attention. You learned that staying under the radar was the most efficient way to maintain your autonomy. This is often mislabeled as shyness, but in a psychological context, it's actually a form of strategic autonomy. You aren't afraid of the crowd. You just don't want to be accountable to them. We also have to consider the observer effect. In physics, the act of observing a phenomenon changes that phenomenon. The same is true for our lives. The moment you decide to post about your dinner, your relationship, or your vacation, the nature of that experience changes from living to documenting. People who never post are often individuals who are deeply protective of their internal locus of control. They don't want their sense of self-worth to be a variable in an algorithm. They understand a truth that the digital age has tried to make us forget, that your life belongs to you, not to your followers. But there is a darker side to this as well, which psychologists call digital alienation. Sometimes the refusal to post isn't a choice made from strength, but one made from a feeling of total identity foreclosure. You don't post because you don't feel like you have a version of yourself that is worthy of being seen. You see everyone else's curated highlights, and you experience a form of social dysmorphia, where your real messy life feels so incompatible with the digital standard that you simply opt out entirely. You become a silent observer, not out of peace, but out of a sense of being othered. This creates a psychological loop. The less you post, the more monumental the first post becomes. It starts to feel like a high-stakes debut rather than a casual update. This is what we call anticipatory social anxiety. You worry about the transactional cost of returning to the digital stage. What will people think? Why are they posting now? Did something change? The mental energy required to answer those silent questions feels too high, so you stay in the shadows. You choose the safety of being the watcher over the vulnerability of being the watched. If you've spent years watching from the sidelines, you might start to feel like a digital outsider. But there is a hidden advantage to this silence that most people overlook. It's what psychologists call unmediated experience. Because you aren't constantly looking for the shareable angle of your life, your memories are stored differently. When you aren't distracted by the observer effect, your brain is able to engage in deep encoding. You remember the smell of the air, the tone of a conversation, and the raw emotion of a moment, rather than just the visual composition of a photo. You are living a high-fidelity life in a low-resolution digital world. This leads us to the concept of sovereign attention. In the attention economy, your focus is the currency. By refusing to post, you are effectively staging a digital strike. You are reclaiming your cognitive bandwidth from the variable reward schedules of likes and notifications, while others are trapped in a cycle of social comparison theory, constantly measuring their behind-the-scenes against everyone else's highlight reels. You are maintaining a stable self-concept. You don't need 1,000 strangers to validate your existence because your validation is intrinsic, not extrinsic. But let's reframe this digital invisibility. What if your refusal to post isn't a sign of social anxiety, but a sign of psychological maturity? In developmental psychology, there is a stage where we move away from the need for external mirroring. You reach a point where you realize that being perceived is not the same as being known. You understand that the digital version of you is just a simulacrum, a copy with no original. By staying silent, you are preserving the sanctity of the private self. You are choosing to be a mystery in an era of overexposure. Think about the spotlight effect. This is the psychological tendency to overestimate how much others notice our appearance or behavior. Most active posters are driven by the fear that if they don't post, they will be forgotten. But the non-poster has conquered this fear. They have embraced JOMO, the joy of missing out. They understand that digital relevance is a moving target that can never truly be hit. By opting out of the race, you've already won. You have achieved temporal sovereignty, the right to spend your time without the pressure of public documentation. This brings us to the identity reframe. If you are a person who never posts, you are a guardian of the unseen. You are a practitioner of radical presence. Your silence is not a void, it is a fortress. Imagine the mental clarity you gain when you are no longer managing a digital avatar. You are free to evolve, to make mistakes, and to change your mind in total privacy. You are not a product to be consumed by an algorithm. You are a process that is still unfolding. Your hyper-observation is a superpower that allows you to see the world as it truly is, without the filter of social desirability bias. We also need to discuss relational depth. People who don't post often have the strongest offline networks. Because you don't broadcast your life, your friends actually have to talk to you to find out how you are. This creates high-stakes vulnerability in your real-world relationships. Every update you give is a gift of intimacy, not a public announcement. You are moving from parasocial interaction to authentic interdependence. You are building a life that is deep, even if it isn't wide. As we wrap this up, I want you to consider a final philosophical thought. We live in a time where the self has become a content creator. We are told that to exist is to be seen. But the oldest wisdom tells us the opposite. The Taoist perspective suggests that the most useful part of a vessel is the empty space inside. Your digital emptiness, your lack of posts, is exactly what makes your internal world so vast and functional. You aren't missing out on the digital conversation. You are having a much more important conversation with yourself. The psychology of people who never post is a story of identity protection. It is a story of a person who values the noumenal, the thing in itself, over the phenomenal, the thing as it appears. You are the silent observer of a world that has forgotten how to be quiet. You are a reminder that the most important parts of life are the ones that can never be captured by a camera or compressed into a caption. Next time you feel the pressure to check in or update your status, I want you to lean into the silence instead. Remind yourself that your worth is not measured in engagement metrics. Your life is not a brand. It is an experience. And some of the most beautiful experiences are the ones that no one else ever knows about. You don't need to post to prove you exist. You exist because you feel, because you think, and because you observe. And that is more than enough.